up, 242 students online? My name is Eda, and I just want to welcome you to today's service. We're so glad you've chosen to hang out with us. It's gorgeous outside. Pull in your friends, do a watch party. There's some small groups that have started meeting in person, and that's been so cool to see. And if you're not able to meet in person yet because of your life circumstances, that's cool too. We're still here for you, and we're so excited that you're joining us for today's service.
As I reflect, I find perspective. You're in the best and worst days of this life. You were always by my side. You're in the pain, you're in the promise, and on the days the furnace finds my faith. You're the fourth within the flames. I don't need to know what the future says. You said the past could talk, it would tell me this. My God isn't finished yet. If He did it before, He can do it again. So I'll trust in what comes next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. And my hindsight says I can trust Him with what's next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. There's more ahead than what's behind me. You've seen the highs and lows and in between. God, you go ahead of me. And when you call me, I will follow. If the waterfalls beneath my feet, yeah, you pull me from the deep. I don't need to know what the future says. 'Cause if the past could talk, it would tell me this. My God isn't finished yet. If He did it before, He can do it again. So I'll trust in what comes next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. And my hindsight says I can trust Him with what's next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. I don't need to know what the future says. 'Cause if the past could talk, it would tell me this. My God isn't finished yet. If He did it before, He can do it again. So I'll trust in what comes next. 'Cause my hindsight says I can count on it. My God isn't finished yet. If He did it before, He can do it again. So I'll trust in what comes next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. And my hindsight says I can trust Him with what's next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness.
Have you ever won a trophy? If you have, well then you know how good it feels to be a winner, don't you? And if you haven't ever won a trophy, well, then you probably know at least how bad it feels to lose. When you meet someone who just seems like they win everything they try, aren't those people kind of annoying? Don't you sometimes find yourself hoping that they'll fail? I remember one time that I hoped someone would fail. I was a sophomore in high school. Where my sophomores at? Woo woo, sophomores, 10th grade. And I was on the JV basketball team. And I remember going into tryouts, fighting with this guy, not fighting, but like competing with this guy named Frankie, for the starting point guard position. And I remember battling it out with him in practice and tryouts, and eventually I earned or won the spot of starting point guard. But he worked hard really every practice, and he was a good player. So I knew that if I had a big mess up, or if I didn't work hard, that there was someone waiting in the wings working really hard to take my spot. Well, fast forward toward the end of the season, we're playing a game, and it's a close game. It ends up going into overtime. And in overtime, I foul out, which, if you don't know basketball, just means that I got too many fouls for them to let me keep playing. And so Frankie comes into the game, and eventually it gets down to there being 8 seconds left. Our team is down 1 point in overtime, and we have the ball, and the coach calls a timeout to draw up a specific play. And while they were drawing up the play, I know this is wrong of me, but I was sitting on the bench imagining Frankie hopefully messing the play up so that our team would lose and it would be his fault and I'd get to keep my spot. But I know that's wrong. But anyways, he draws up the play, and the play doesn't go as planned. So instead of Frankie passing the ball to one of the guys on our team, he wasn't open. So Frankie was stuck with the ball, and as the buzzer is about to sound, he launches his shot, and it goes in. The play didn't work out, but Frankie became the hero of the game because of that. And while everyone was celebrating, I was trying to not look so disappointed. Eventually, I got over my pride, and I went and congratulated him, and we moved on with the season. But I'm guessing that I'm not the only person who's ever wanted someone to fail, maybe even wanted a teammate to fail. And because I know that you probably have a similar story somewhere in your life, I'm excited for what we're going to talk about today. Our conversation is about a guy named Jonah who wanted some people to fail pretty big. But before we get that, I want to remind you that we're in this series called For Them, and we're talking about how God is for you and how God is for others. And today we're going to take it a step further. He's not just for others, and he just doesn't call us to be for others. God is actually for our enemies. So today I'm going to introduce you to a prophet, a reluctant prophet named Jonah. Maybe you've heard of Jonah before, but Jonah is going to remind us of ourselves when we find ourselves wanting someone else to fail so that we can feel better about ourselves. So Jonah was sent by God. He was called by God to be a prophet. Now, last week we talked about this. A prophet is someone who God gives them a message to go and take to someone or a group of people. So God gives Jonah a message to go to the city of Nineveh and give them a message. Now, Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh, and he had every reason to not want to go there. Nineveh was the capital, is a big city, capital of a nation called Assyria. And Assyria had just come through and conquered Israel. And Jonah was part of the nation of Israel. And in the meantime, while they were conquering Israel, they murdered people, they destroyed homes and villages, they raped people, they did some really disgusting things. They destroyed all the traditions of the people of Israel. And so they had every right to hate Nineveh. The Israelites were justified in the way they felt about them. But if you remember, God did not raise up the nation of Israel to be them or anyone. Not them or Nineveh, not them or others. It was always supposed to be Israel for the world. God was going to show his love for the entire world through the nation of Israel. But man, when stuff like this happens, being for your enemies can be really, really tough. So here's how Jonah's story begins in the Bible. If you want to read it, it's only 4 chapters. It's really short, but it's a good read. This is how it starts. It says that the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. And he says, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because the wickedness of Nineveh has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed to Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Jonah's trying to run away from God. You know how when your parents tell you to do something you don't want to do? And so you just kind of don't do it? Have you ever been there where you just kind of like pretend like you didn't hear, you keep going on doing your own thing, ignoring your parents? That's what Jonah does with God. He was about to go anywhere but Nineveh. He was not interested in preaching to the Ninevites. He was not interested in seeing them. He was definitely not interested in talking to them about God. He just wanted to avoid them at all costs. So that's what he did. And you can read the next section on your own, chapter 2. Jonah ends up getting swallowed by a giant fish. And then while he's in the belly of the fish, he prays to God and asks God to give him one more chance. And God says, okay, I'm going to give you another chance. And so the fish barfs Jonah up on land. And then God says, okay, now go to Nineveh. Where I'm calling you is the same. And this time he goes. This is what it says in Jonah chapter 3. That this time Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and he went to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was a large city, so it took him 3 days to go through it. And I imagine that he's giving a half effort here. I imagine Jonah going through the town saying, hey, turn from your ways or God's going to destroy you. Turn from your ways or God's going to destroy you. I'm doing what he told me to. He told me to come and say this. Turn from your ways or God's going to destroy you. But check out how the king of this terrible, terrible city responds. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, he took off his royal robes, and he covered himself with sackcloth, like itchy clothing, and he sat down in the dust. He took a lowly, humble place. This is a way of saying that he stepped out of whatever privilege he had and stepped into a place of humility in order to say, God, do with me what you want. And then he proclaimed this in Nineveh. He said, by the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people, animals, herds, or flocks taste anything. You can't eat, you can't drink, but let the people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone be like this, humbled. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. And then he says, who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. And when God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and he did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Amazingly, despite Jonah's half-hearted attempt to preach to them, God used even the, hey, don't keep doing evil stuff, turn from your ways or God's gonna, he used a half effort in order to change the people of Nineveh's heart. And so God is not going to destroy them or bring evil or bring difficulty on them. And so you could think, okay, this is awesome, great, thanks, awesome. God's will was done. End of story. They all lived happily ever after. But that's not exactly how it happened. In fact, if you're reading through Jonah, there's 4 chapters, not 3. And check out how when we turn the page to chapter 4, Jonah responds. It says that, but to Jonah this seemed very wrong, and he became angry, and he prayed to the Lord, and he said, this isn't what I said, Lord, isn't this what I said when I was still at home? This is what I tried to avoid by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew, God, that you were gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. I knew you were a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, God, take away my life, for it's better for me to die than to live. Thanks to Jonah, God had saved Nineveh from destruction. But Jonah's mad about this. Jonah knew that God could do this and thought that God would do this. And this is specifically why he didn't want to go, because he knew, if I tell them, then God, you'll not destroy them. And that's what I want to happen to them. Can you imagine hating someone that much that you wanted them to be destroyed? Can you imagine hating a group of people that much? maybe you can't. Or maybe you can't. But God's reply to Jonah looked like this. God says to Jonah, is it even right for you to be angry? The hatred and indifference that Jonah felt for Nineveh is the kind of hatred and indifference that's caused some of our darkest moments in human history. God needed Jonah to understand that he had it all wrong. For the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about how God is for you. God is for others. He calls us to be for others, and not just our people. He calls us to be for all people. God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, while we were still enemies of God, Christ died for us. Like the people of Nineveh, we were once enemies of God, and God didn't use that against us. Instead, he was for us and sent Jesus to be for us. Through Jonah, God showed compassion and love to the people of Nineveh, and through Jesus, God shows compassion and love to you and me, and he calls us to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to be the compassion and love for the world around us. So, will you take on the challenge to love and be for even your enemies? If we're really gonna love our enemies, it's gonna cause us to do some work, some like internal work to discover maybe even who our enemy is. I know this isn't easy. Don't hear me say that it's easy. Maybe you've been through something like Jonah had been through, where some people had done some really terrible things to people that were close to him. And maybe someone's done something terrible to you. If you've been a victim of abuse or something like that, like, I'm so sorry. And God knows what you're going through. And please don't go through that alone. Please, if you've been a victim of abuse, reach out to an adult. I'm not asking you to forget that or pretend like it didn't happen. I'm just asking you to talk to someone about it, have someone walk you through that, and also have a conversation with God about that. Just like Jonah had a conversation with God about the people of Nineveh. But I don't know who comes to your mind when I say enemies. Maybe you're holding a name or two that as soon as I said that, you knew who they were. Maybe you're holding a group of people in your mind. But take a moment and reflect on these questions as you start to discover who is your enemy. Think about who has hurt you. Think about who you haven't forgiven. Think about who would you love to see fail. Think about who do you wish everyone disliked as much as you dislike them? Are there any people or people groups that you just kind of wish you didn't ever have to see again? That God would just kind of like take care of them? Now, if you have some names or faces in mind, take a few more moments and reflect on these questions. How does it feel to know that God is for that person or those people? That his love is toward them? What would you want to ask or say to God about them? And in what way do you need God to transform the way you see that person so that you can see them the way God sees them? And what would it look like for you to be for your enemies? Being for our enemies is hard work, but it's worth it. Just like God brought us hope when we were God's enemies by sending Jesus to die for us, we get to bring hope to others, even the people who are the hardest for us to love.
One name holds a weight above them all. His face
Friends, this has been such a cool series, listening to the voices of different people. And I'm just leaning into the voices of the people around me and growing in my faith through this summer. I'm actually reading through Proverbs, and it's been super cool because it's kind of random, but many deep things that I can lean into. And that's kind of what this series is. Don't stop here in your engagement with us. If you're not already part of a community, a small group at your campus, please fill out a next steps card and we'll get you plugged in to a small group. And if you want to get baptized, it's gorgeous out. People are being baptized in rivers and at lakes. Please fill out the next steps card and let us know that you want to do that, want to take that next step, and we're here for you. We're so excited to work with you on this journey. Take care, friends. Come back next week and bring a friend. Bye.